Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April Filled with Less show. We missed March, didn't we?
We sure did.
I missed you. I missed doing this. Me too. And it was because of the big flood.
Yes.
So why don't we remind everyone?
As you may or may not have heard, yes, there is a biblical proportioned flood in the Ancient Faith studio. They were doing some work. A water main broke, and for hours, water was just flooding in. So there's a lot of cleanup to be done in the last month. So there was no studio shows. But I have to say, I think it looks better than ever in here.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. Beautiful new carpet. It's very, very nice.
Yes, and thanks to my sweet mom,
Yes.
Tanya Maddox, who spruced up our recording space a little bit. So I think, maybe a blessing in
maybe
disguise.
a blessing.
They got a chance to, I think, kind of reorganize a little bit. And looks fabulous.
Between the flood of March and the camera not working at first this morning, I was just thinking, typical Lent.
Oh, yeah.
Right? This is just a Lent thing. Floods, technology issues.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
But we've got it all together now, and we've got a very nice show set for you today. It's going to be a little bit different, and we'll talk about how it's going to be different later. But first, we just want to catch up with each other and with you, and I think we're going to do something that we do in our membership. So our membership meets once a month in a live session, and when we have time, we do something called Rosebud Thorne. So Molly, why don't you tell them what that is?
So Rosebud Thorne is an exercise to spark conversation. I actually stumbled upon it when my kids were younger. I did not make this up. I stole this from who knows where. But I used it because at dinner, we'd ask our kids and say, "How was your day?" And they'd be fine. And then that was the conversation killer.
I've heard that. I'm used to that.
I was like, how can I get them to tell me a little bit more? So someone told me that they would ask at dinner table, what was your rose and thorn? So what was the highlight of your day? What was the struggle of your day? And my kids really like that. It's a good way to find out a little more information. It's something that we continue to do even now in their 20s, they're home from college or whatever. Just say, what was the rose and thorn of your month, of your semester, or whatever. We started doing this with our members, which is just a really neat way to get to know each other better. And a lot of times, someone will ask you what's been going on, and you're just like, I have no idea. You're just like, your brain just fried. And so this is helpful to think that through. And so we added bud to it.
Yes.
So the rose is, again, what was the highlight? What was the blessing? The thorn, what was kind of difficult? And the bud is, what are you working on?
Yes. So who wants to go first? You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So since we met last, the rose, and I think of this as a rose, this is such a blessing. And as Molly knows already, my husband got in a car accident. He was on his way to church a couple weeks ago and calls me at 7:30. And he was sitting at a red light. Someone hit him from behind going about 60 miles an hour.
Gosh.
And oh my gosh, I just feel like it's a miracle. Somehow his car was pushed forward in between the car next to him and the car in front of him, so he didn't hit any other cars. Yeah, and he came away with a stiff neck. His x-ray said, showed that everything was okay. So I'm just thanking God for this blessing.
Right, that could have been so much worse.
I think I don't know, it's so easy to just go through life and just forget that someone could be taken from you just like that.
Right.
It's kind of scary, but yeah, so I'm thanking God for that rose. And then as far as the bud goes, I think a lot of people know that I have a lung disease that causes me to cough all the time. And speaking of which, it looks like we're on to something.
Yes.
And it's genetic. And I don't know about all of the people in our audience, and Molly, tell me if you're different.
Okay.
But I like to know what I'm dealing with.
Me too.
Like, even if it's like, Cynthia, you have cancer, or Cynthia, you have this or that, whatever. if you know, then there's hope. Then you can start saying, okay, what's the plan?
Right.
But good. I'm glad you're like that too.
Oh, yeah.
When it's nebulous,
yes,
that just leaves me up in the air.
Yeah, I think answers, and especially with your health, it just gives you a way to move forward.
Yeah.
You know, I hate when you're just, it could be anything, and you feel like you're your own advocate, you're researching all these things, and just to get an answer is such a relief. So I'm so happy when you told me that.
Yeah, thank you. I want to encourage everyone listening or watching today that you just don't ever give up. Like, let's say your doctor says, well, you have XYZ, here's a medication, you'll need to be on it for the rest of your life. Or like my pulmonologist said, you know, you're going to have this bronchiectasis for the rest of your life. Here's an inhaler, which didn't even work for me. But now I'm finding the underlying issue for why I have bronchiectasis, and there's so much we can do. So keep looking, keep searching, be your own advocate, and as I always say, be your own CEO of your health.
Yes.
So important. And then as far as the thorn goes, I was having a hard time with the whole thorn thing, coming up with something. But like I said earlier, typical Lent, I think a lot of people can relate to this. I've had some low points this Lent. I had one whole week where I just felt depressed. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I kept trying to think, you know, what's missing? What am I not doing? What should I be doing? Where's this coming from? And we're actually going to get into that a little more today with our guest, so stay tuned for that. But then I came out of it, and I'm fine, and I don't know what plunged me into it in the first place. But that thorn kind of knowing that our moods and our disposition can go up and down without us even knowing why, and then dealing with it in a constructive way.
Yes.
Is something to be learned.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that further because I think that many of us struggle with that. So for myself, the thorn is, because I'm going to start with thorn.
Okay, that's good.
Because I like to go up.
Yeah, I like that.
And my thorn, it's like a theme with all we've already talked about. My thorn has been car issues.
Oh, yes.
So we had, oh my gosh, a couple weeks ago, my son was home, took one of our cars back to Bloomington, about a 3-hour drive, hour and a half in. He calls and says, the check engine light's flashing, can't go over like 35. We're like, okay, pull over. And we get a tow truck there, find a dealer. We are bringing out cars so we can leave him with one. And on our way to get him, my husband's check engine light comes on. Can't go over 50 miles an hour. And then they're both in the shop.
You just have to laugh.
I know. Sometimes. At this point, we're like, what is happening? So that did. It felt very Lenten. I felt very appropriately Lenten. So that was probably my thorn. It's been a lot of unexpected expenses car-wise. Yeah. And then my rose was earlier in that week. I had unexpectedly all of my kids home for a 2-day overlap. My daughter was home for spring break. My son was coming through town. I did not know. And they were all together. And one of those evenings, we just sat on the couch and for like an hour or 2 hours, just like laughing and nice. Reminiscing and looking at old pictures and giving updates. And I mean, I thought my heart was going to burst.
Oh, I bet.
You know, I've been really working hard on embracing this season. You know, we talk about a lot of motherhood, of really letting go, giving my kids freedom to move on, to make their own decisions, be their own people, and focusing on my own personal growth, my own goals, my own faith and relationships. But, you know, having that special time with them, it just filled up my bucket for weeks. Yeah. So that was really special. And then my bud is, I'm working on a couple projects I'm really excited about. So the first one is we're actually working on together. We started talking about it, is that stillness companion.
Yes.
So, you know, as most of you know, over the last 2 years, I've really become an avid journaler. Really love doing that deep inner work, that reflective work. I think it's amazing. It has helped, I'm not kidding, like really get me out of some stuck mindsets to forgive things that I had not been able to forgive for a long time. I think it improved my health and really helped me make linear progress on some goals. And I want to help other people do that kind of intentional work.
Yes.
And we want to make that easier for you and kind of guide you through that for people who want to pursue a peaceful mind, healthy body, productive life. So, yeah, kind of in the throes of that. And then the other thing I'm working on is something I call self-care for the insanely stressed and busy, a young adult's introduction to intentionality.
Yes.
And this was basically composed out of many conversations I've had with my own young adult children. I have young adult nieces and nephews, their friends. I have a real soft spot for this generation. I think they're amazing. I think that they are creative. They are passionate. I have been so stretched personally by interacting with these young adults, but I also see that they are incredibly stressed. They are stretched so thin. They are moving much faster than we did at their age. They know more. They are exposed to more. And they are measuring themselves up against some ideals that are absolutely not even reality that is being sold to them, on Instagram and TikTok. And so I wanted to create just a guide for learning how to take gentle, good care of yourself, and the difference between disorganization, which is pure chaos, perfectionism, which is very shame-based, very rigid, but instead of wellness as a way of life, which is love-based, which is balanced, moderation. So,
right.
Yes.
I'm excited about that. I got to read it yesterday, and
keep tweaking it.
Yeah, we're turning it into a ebook, or I'm not sure what we're turning it into quite yet, but it's going to be on the Filled with Less website. So if you know any young people that are coming to your mind while Molly's talking about this, make sure you go to filledwithless.com and you'll see that resource there.
Yeah.
Hopefully real soon.
Yeah. And even for yourself, if you're just brand new to intention, if this is something you're not familiar with, it's a good introduction to anybody who's feeling stuck and just wants help getting unstuck.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you enjoyed the whole Rosebud Thorne exercise, and maybe you can do this with your kids at home, or if you're like Molly and you have kids away at college, maybe you're on the phone and you're not sure, how to pull them out and really share their lives with you. This is a wonderful way to help them to do that. So that brings us to our show today. We told you we were going to mix it up a little bit. Normally we have the Peaceful Mind segment, then we have another interview for Healthy Body, and then last, Productive Life. We are squeezing Peaceful Mind and Healthy Body together today because we have an excellent guest coming on. Her name is Christina Veselak, and recently I interviewed her for my podcast. We started talking about mental health. We started talking about amino acids and protein, and so as you can tell, the mind and the body going together, and she is an expert, and she's going to answer some burning questions that we all have about getting enough protein during Lent. And I even had emails come out to me recently after that podcast aired asking the same thing. And I said, you're in luck. We're going to cover this in our show. And then we're going to our Productive Life segment, and Molly and I are going to share some of our biggest aha moments from the last couple months, just a couple things that we learned that opened up our minds and made our lives more productive. So with that, let's get on to the Peaceful Mind segment.
Christina Veselak is the founder and director of the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition. She has been a licensed psychotherapist for over 30 years and currently provides online relapse prevention coaching and mental health nutrition to a wide variety of clients. Christina is also a founding member and former executive director of the Alliance for Addiction Solutions, a nonprofit organization that promotes the use of nutritional and other natural modalities to support the repair of the addicted brain. She is committed to staying abreast of the rapidly growing science of orthomolecular psychiatry and functional nutrition and biochemistry for mental health, and is passionate about sharing her knowledge with both the general public and professionals in the fields of addiction recovery and mental health treatment. She also has an excellent nonprofit that we'll be talking about later called eatingproteinsaveslives.org, and she is a matushka.
Hello, Christina Veselok. Thank you so much for coming on the Filled with Less show.
Well, you're so welcome, Cynthia. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Excited too. Ever since I interviewed you for the Holistic Christian Life podcast, I couldn't wait to talk to you again. And like we talked about when we were off air after the podcast, there's so many things we can talk about. So we just primed the audience and told them that we are putting the Peaceful Mind and the Healthy Body segment together today so that we can talk to you for a longer time. So I hope that's okay with you.
That's perfect.
Good, good, good. Well, first of all, we're going to be talking about mental health. And I know that there's a lot of shame attached to mental health for some Christians because they look at it as lacking in faith, right? They're embarrassed about it. And they also think that it has to do with self-discipline. So as a Christian, especially as an Orthodox Christian, what would you say to that?
It's really hard to know where to start from that. What first came to mind is the myth of the happy Christian. That we think we're supposed to be happy, that we're supposed to be joyful, that we're supposed to trust God at all times. And as fallen human beings, all struggling towards salvation, none of us are there. You know, some of us can have more joy at more times, more faith at more times. And then one of two things happen, Cynthia. Either circumstances just get to us, and, you know, those waves get a bit big and we can't see the Lord because the waves are too big, or it's too dark. And that's a normal part of the Christian life. You know, we see this modeled for us all through Scripture. And then, you know, we reach out for the Lord, or He reaches out for us, and we feel loved again and we feel safe again, maybe for a moment, and, you know, we can walk forward. But the other thing that happens that we don't talk much about in the church are two things. One, the impact of trauma, you know, early childhood trauma or life trauma, on our ability to stay emotionally stable and grounded and spiritually stable and grounded. Because what trauma does is it deeply makes us feel unsafe in the world. It deeply makes us feel abandoned and let down or betrayed or violated. And so now we have this huge other mountain that we have to climb to overcome these feelings that can get in the way of trust and faith and joy and peace and, because our nervous system has been hijacked, our brain has been hijacked, and our heart has been hijacked. And so understanding this is so crucial to forgiving ourselves for our struggles. We need to be able to forgive ourselves. We need to be able to accept ourselves just as we are, with all of our struggles, all of our hindrances, all of our challenges, because the Lord does. He accepts us just the way we are with all of our challenges. He reaches out His hand and meets us in the darkness. Right? We're almost at Good Friday and Holy Saturday, and the Lord Himself descended into Hades, right? He meets us there. And we need to remember that, and that helps us forgive ourselves. The second thing that needs to be talked about more in the church and understood more deeply is that it may not be trauma that hijacks us. It may be our own biochemistry that hijacks us all by itself. Whether it be genetics, usually genetics, or other things, we can be genetically predisposed towards depression, or anxiety or anger or.
Right.
And again, we need to be able to forgive ourselves for this, and we need to be able to have hope and peace.
I'm glad you brought that up, Christina. In fact, at the top of the show, I had just shared with Molly and our entire audience that a couple weeks ago, I was very depressed. I was lethargic. I didn't know what had happened. I couldn't pinpoint why. I know that depression runs in my family. I'm a descendant of Meriwether Lewis, who famously struggled with depression and ultimately took his own life. And I've seen depression come down through our genetics that way. And I have had to try to learn to give myself grace and to say, okay, Cynthia,
Yeah.
you have to stop beating yourself up that you're not being more productive. If you just need to sit on the couch and read, just let yourself do that. And I did end up popping out of it. So I love that you talked about that. And I think a lot of people who feel depressed at times or anxious or other emotions tend to feel very alone, like they're supposed to hide this and not let other people know about it. And I love that you bring it to light.
Yes, yes. And, you know, it's a good thing to remember, like you said, not only if it's trauma, and I would say we've all experienced a trauma over the last 2 years collectively.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that trauma, like you said, can be affecting us physiologically, like every aspect of us. So physically, our body could even be responding in ways that we may not be aware of. And there's something about, I think what you're saying, like trying to figure out how to separate ourselves from the feelings, that we are not the feelings, that's not our identity, and be able to create space to lovingly observe a bigger picture in order to
Exactly.
move forward.
In order to move forward and in order to realize, I love that idea of creating space. I am not my feelings. And sometimes my feelings are not accurate representations of what's actually going on. We assume that they're accurate because they feel accurate, but they're not. And so to learn how to question them, to learn how to hold them lightly is key. And to remember that part of being a fallen human being, now this is part of our fallenness, that we are susceptible to nervous system dysregulation, to genetic barriers and burdens, to the impact of trauma, and to the impact of not taking care of ourselves, too. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And that the Lord knows that that's part of what he meant when he said that he came to save the unrighteous, not just the righteous.
Yes. Yes.
And I actually took, several years ago, I had a confessor who helped me tremendously because I started confessing all of the behaviors, attitudes, and feelings that resulted from my trauma and from my genetic depression. And they're not sins as we tend to think of sin, but they are sin in that they are not of God and they are not truth. And as such, we need the healing grace of God to overcome them. And so I found that by bringing those things to confession, they healed faster. I had more grace to recognize and overcome them. And I want to share that with your audience because it was so powerful in my own healing.
So not necessarily saying, well, this isn't a sin, so it's not something to be confessed, but actually you are falling short of ultimately who you want to be, and God's giving you this journey, and taking it to your spiritual father is a great opportunity to get it out in the open.
Well, it really is. And there's grace in the sacrament. And to open ourselves up to that healing and transforming grace. Because, these thoughts and behaviors, if we broaden the concept of sin to be whatever is not of God, then it fits in that category. Because it is not being who God created us to be in the fullness, right, of His glory. And so we get to confess it. We get to confess it. Isn't that wonderful, that concept?
Right.
I like that concept. We get to, just like we get to fast during Lent, we get to do these things, right?
Yeah.
It's a blessing.
And there's a humility and an authenticity that's kind of required for that. I think about there's so many times even we want to hide certain aspects of ourselves because we're ashamed of them.
Right.
And we can even hide them in our spiritual lives.
Sure we do.
But there has to be this complete openness and authenticity so you can be healed of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we're trying to work on even with Phil with Less is, being authentic, coming with all your wounds, because we're here to be healed, right? We're not here to be perfect. We're not here to be...
That's right.
And
we're
so
not here to be perfect. And this is where you see shame and humiliation gets to be transformed into humility.
Yeah.
Right? Humility is the other side of shame and humiliation. And this is what God wants, came to transform us from shame, from, oh, I shouldn't be this way. What a bad person I am. I need to pretend that I'm just perfect in order to be acceptable and savable. And the Lord says, no, I'm going to save you all on my own. You just keep walking towards me. You don't need to be perfect. You do need to keep walking towards me, however. But you can walk towards me in everything you are, all of your wounds, all of your fears, all of your depression, all of your anxiety, all of your self-hatred. You can still bring it to me, and I'll love it, and I'll love you. And guess what? I'll heal you of it, too. Maybe not overnight, but I'm working on it.
It's beautiful. How does our mindset around mental health and addiction sabotage or contribute to our healing?
Because by believing that we shouldn't have emotional issues, mental illness, weakness, addictive disorders, we hide from ourselves. We try to put up this mask, both to ourselves as well as to the outside world, that we're really okay. And we have so much shame that it keeps us from facing ourselves. It keeps us from realizing that something actually is wrong and we really do need to ask for help, that we can't do it ourselves, that we shouldn't even try to do it ourselves. Because, of course, one of the false beliefs that comes from shame is that I need to fix myself all by myself and I can't let anybody else know. And that prevents us from being loved and receiving the resources of professionals and the resources of the church, the resources of love. It's hard to love somebody when you don't know what their struggles are. And aren't we called to carry each other's burdens? You see.
We are.
But I can't carry your burden if you have too much pride and shame to share your burden with me. Pride, by the way, is the flip side of shame. Because pride is a defense against shame. Pride is, see, I'm just fine. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I'm great. because underneath that is, ooh, I'm really not okay. I'm scared and I'm little and I'm hurting. But if you really knew who I really was, oh, you would hate me and you would reject me. And then I would really be alone. So I'm just going to make myself as good and perfect and, great as I possibly can. And that way you won't have a chance to see how awful things really are.
Right. And I've seen the self-sabotaging behaviors where people do just also push other people away.
Right.
They try to flee from authentic personal relationships where that inner them that doesn't have that gloss over it tries to hide. Right. And the key is to just trust. I guess trust that we are all going through something. We're all dealing with our own demons, so to speak. We all are putting a gloss over a big part of us that we're working on and trying to fix, and being brave.
Yeah, I was thinking so pride and shame are very isolating.
Very isolating.
Humility, it really opens to love. And it gives us access to the one thing that can save us, which is community, and love. And because when you are authentic about your struggle, someone else can say, "Oh, you understand. There's hope for me too." But it takes a leap of faith, right, to have that kind of humility and trust in each other and in God's grace and mercy.
Can I slip in a question here, Christina?
Of course.
I'm sorry, I just interrupted something you were going to say. But because you're an addiction specialist also, I'd like to ask you if how this relates to addiction, because you're so good in this area. But I don't want to circumvent what you were about to say to Molly, so take whichever one you want.
Okay. Well, I'm going to finish what I was about to say, and then we'll move into addiction, and they're very close anyway. And that is, it was a very powerful experience for me in my late teens, maybe early 20s, when somebody somehow mentioned to me about how stuck up I was and how I clearly thought that I was so much better than everybody else around me. Right? Well, this comment absolutely floored me because my internal personal experience was I was so much less than everybody else, and I needed to hide because nobody would really care about what I had to say anyway, so I was way too scared to speak. Well, this other person who clearly had their own shame issues was interpreting that as just the opposite. She was interpreting my shame and my hiding and my fear as me being too good to talk to her. It's like, oh my God.
I've seen that.
Yes. And once I realized that, oh my goodness, other people have the same fears I do and the same negative, untrue interpretations that I do, that maybe I don't have to be quite so scared anymore. And maybe I don't have to be quite so barricaded anymore because it wasn't true. Yeah. So that was a huge transformative moment for me.
Because you learn to be compassionate. I find as you learn to be compassionate or gentle on yourself, you're naturally more compassionate and gentle to other people. Like they're so connected.
Yes, exactly. And when I shared with this woman that the opposite of what she was assuming was actually true, we were actually able to have a moment of intimacy where, we realized that we were both actually struggling with the same fears and the same shame.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful thing that we could get there with each other.
Yeah, it was a God sent that interaction to to you both.
It really was. Yeah. It was quite life-changing.
Yeah. So in the realm of addiction, how does this drive?
People with addiction and the family members of people with addiction tend to be stuck in shame. Shame is one of the huge driving forces behind addiction, and that it then sucks family members and other people into its sphere, into its realm. And that is because as human beings, we seem to have the belief, we live with the belief that we are supposed to be in control of ourselves at all times. We're supposed to be in control of the world around us. We're supposed to be in control of what happens to us. And therefore, if we're not, if there's something bigger than us that has control over us, and that's what addiction is, because addiction takes away free will, addiction takes away choice, addiction traps us, and it imprisons us. And a lot of people don't realize that about addiction. They think, well, just say no. Why is it a problem for you? It's not a problem for me, so it shouldn't be a problem for you. And what very few people, unless you've been in it or through it or understand it, get that that's precisely what addiction takes away from us, is the ability to just say no, is the ability to just walk away from it. Now we can overcome it, but not just, right? It takes a lot of work to overcome these patterns, because I think of it as a three-legged stool. Addiction has a biochemical component. It's driven by imbalanced chemicals in the brain. Well, that's way outside of willpower, right? We can't will ourselves to have balanced brain chemicals. But it also has, psychological and social and spiritual components to it as well. And so to get well, to overcome addictive disorders, we need to be addressing, all three components at pretty much the same time. But we need to start by getting our brains back online. Because as we get our brains online, then we are more able to effectively address the psychological issues, make the social changes we need to make, step up socially, and transform spiritually.
Yeah, so important. And, I would think in any of our parishes at any given time, even if we don't know it, there are probably many people attending church with us who are struggling with mental health and addiction, or people they love have mental health and addiction struggles. And what are your thoughts on how, as a church, that we can really begin to better serve one another in this way, this kind of support?
Two things immediately come to mind, Molly. One is that it would be so helpful if the clergy in their sermons actually dove deep into some of these real issues and really named some of the struggles that we're all living with, and gave some practical solutions, the spiritual solutions, how to apply our faith to some of these struggles that goes beyond praying more and fasting more and going to church. Because some of us actually need to have it named on that really drilled down level. So, we hear in the homilies and the sermons that we're supposed to love each other. Well, what does that actually mean? We're supposed to bear each other's burdens. Well, how do we do that in a parish? And so the second answer to you, therefore, is one of the hows is to have regular education in the parish around these issues. And possibly to have, discreet and confidential support or healing groups. To have recovery groups. A lot of the evangelical churches have recovery groups attached to their congregations. And I know some Orthodox churches who do as well. And this is very healing because we get to come together. And it is one way to support each other. But the more it is openly spoke about, it is openly talked about, that there are perhaps retreats around some of these issues. Lenten retreats, Advent retreats, around some of these very specific issues can be so powerful in a parish.
It's almost
because
like
without education, we don't know anything. And without education, everybody's going to be hiding in their little shame corner because there's no permission to speak.
Right.
And because there's no context to speak.
Mm-hmm.
There's no context to share, to ask for prayer around some of our struggles. So the parishes can create ways to provide context for this. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
Yeah,
because it's almost like how we speak of it. If it's spoken about in kind of hushed tones, like, well, I heard so and so had,
right.
Then you retreat, But to speak about it lovingly, openly, that really does give people the ability to step out from the shadows into the light and begin to feel they can be healed.
It really does. And this is true for trauma as well. So there are people in all of our congregations who've experienced incest and who've experienced sexual assault. When was the last time in your parish you had an open conversation about incest or rape? Hey?
I can't remember.
Right.
We don't.
Yeah.
But there are women in my congregation, in our congregation, me, who've experienced sexual assault and who are in recovery from it and other traumas as well. And I don't know anybody else in my current parish or my old parish who had, but I know they're there. I've been a psychotherapist for 35 years, and a lot of my clients are within the church, so I know we're everywhere. And so to lower the shame about this, even if, we're not saying, well, tell me your deepest, darkest secret, right? We're not doing that. We're saying this is a place where we understand that very terrible, horrible things have happened to you. And that when you are called on to forgive those who've harmed you, some of the people who've harmed you may have harmed you in absolutely horrific ways. And that it may not be so easy to forgive those people. We may have to do a lot of healing to get to the point where we can forgive those people. Right. And we need to understand then what forgiveness is and what it isn't.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I love this because it gives another aspect to the church as a healing place, the church as a hospital. In so many ways, if we can't go to the church and have open conversations about this,
these difficult things,
trauma,
right?
addiction, etc., Where do
can
we
we
go?
go?
Do we have to go to secular sources? No, I'd rather go to the church.
It would be nice to be able to go to the church.
It would be.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears a little bit here, I want to get into sort of the healthy body aspect of this interview. And going back to mindset, having a mindset that is positive and knowing that something can be done and that there's some answers out there, I think can be incredibly healing and help us.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing a lot with amino acid therapy, which I just find fascinating. And I know you've had some tremendous success. So can you tell people about what amino acid therapy is and maybe even give us a case study?
Absolutely. And I'm also going to talk about balancing blood sugar, because the two kind of go hand in hand in terms of supporting emotional and mental stability. So we don't think about this very much, but all of our moods, our feelings, our perceptions, our beliefs, our ability to act in the world, to have willpower, to have choice, to even sleep, all of these things are mediated through brain chemicals called neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters are made out of the food we eat. Okay, they are made out of little molecules called amino acids that come from the protein we eat in the presence of vitamins and minerals. So it actually matters what we eat to our emotional life. It matters what we eat to recovery from addiction, to recovery from mental illness, to recovery from all of these things, because our brains, well, our whole body functioning, right, is made up and dependent upon getting the nutrients that's required. Well, the brain requires very specific nutrients to function optimally. One of my favorite sayings is that it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully. Gracefully. But to do that, it needs to be fed optimally. So the very fundamental question is, are we feeding our brains optimally? And as I mentioned before, part of what the brain requires are amino acids that come from the protein we eat. Well, they're very specific ones that make each of our neurotransmitter systems. We have 4 major mood-mediating neurotransmitter systems, and 3 of the 4 are made out of a single amino acid, and the 4th is made out of a series of them. If we don't get enough in our diet, we are not going to have a good, stable, happy mood or behavior. Now, the wonderful thing is that while we're working on our diet, while we're working on our digestion and absorption, because sometimes poor digestion or inflammation in the gut can get in the way of absorbing these amino acids, we can actually buy them over the counter. You can go into your local vitamin store, you can click on Amazon and actually buy them. And they work within 20 minutes. They actually can get into the brain, temporarily refill the neurotransmitter store, and you can feel better. Now, that's going to wear off, and so you need to take it again. But over time, you get to take less and less to get the same effect. This is why I call amino acids anti-addictive. Because with addictive substances, they do their job by firing and depleting these all-important neurotransmitters. Amino acids do their job by feeding the brain and rebuilding the neurotransmitter stores. So there's more and more and more there to be used whenever needed. So over time, you get to stop taking them. But, for some people, it may be a short period of time. For other people, it may be years. I was one of those for whom it was years. But I had a lot going on. But that's not true for me anymore. So now I'm at a really good, solid, stable place. And occasionally I will take an amino acid. Last night, I was having trouble sleeping because I'd had a lot going on in the day, and I was still a little revved up. So I took the amino acid theanine. So theanine supports our calming neurotransmitters, and it blocks the stress hormones. Not 100% blocks them, but softens them, right? Mm-hmm. So it softens adrenaline and cortisol and norepinephrine, and so within 20 minutes, it was like, okay, I can go to sleep now.
Yeah, I've used theanine for some clients. I think I mentioned this to you on my podcast to help them with, they wanted to get off of their anxiety medications. And, I'm never like, I'm just a health coach. I can't get people off their medications, but she started taking theanine and she was able to wean off herself.
Exactly, because we support the brain through the withdrawal process. So as health coaches, as nutritionists, we're allowed to help people support their brains.
Yes, exactly.
Using these nutrients.
So I have a question for you. So well, first of all, there's so many things I want to say to you and ask you. But I know that you've had a lot of luck with your patients when you've been able to start working on their diet and their amino acids and their blood sugar control and everything in ways that you weren't taught back in school 35, 40 years ago. And this has been an incredible opportunity, and it has expanded your practice, I'm sure, and you've had a lot of success.
Tremendously.
Yeah.
Tremendously. I say that as a psychotherapist, there are 3 tools that I would never be without. I would never be without amino acids because it supports the brain so quickly and so powerfully that people can engage in the therapy part so much more effectively and efficiently. And then I wouldn't be without EMDR, and I wouldn't be without inner child work. So those 3 are very fast, very powerful tools that just transformed my practice almost from the very beginning. Clinicians are still not being taught this, Cynthia. The idea of that the brain actually needs to be fed optimally to support emotional well-being and stability, this is still a concept that has not hit home yet. I don't quite understand it. And this is why I started my school 7 years ago, the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition, where I teach clinicians how to use these wonderful tools in their practice. So this includes both the psychotherapist and the psychiatrist. I've had psychiatrists go through my program, as well as the health coach and the nutritionist, because you guys aren't taught how to use these tools to address mental health or addictive issues either.
Right.
And so I really want to bring both communities together and also create collaboration between both communities because it's such a powerful collaboration.
Yeah. I'm super excited. God willing, I will be able to take your course and get certified. I'm super excited about that, just from the little bit I've seen. So amino acids are directly related to protein, and is that animal protein mostly, or plant protein? Where are you getting these amino acid building blocks from?
Well, so all protein contains amino acids, but sometimes it's not always the same amino acids. And of course, we need specific ones for the brain. It's much easier to get the amino acids for neurotransmitter support in the quantity we need using animal protein, including milk and seafood. It is much harder to do it with vegan sources. I'm not saying it's impossible. You just have to really focus on it. You have to know what you're doing. You have to take it seriously. A lot of people who become vegan in general, for whatever reason they become vegan, and those of us in the church who have, vegan fasting periods, we don't always take seriously how to feed ourselves appropriately during the fast. And people who are vegan for other reasons just cut out protein and eat whatever and think they're going to be just fine, and then wonder why they're not. And some people may feel better initially on a vegan diet because perhaps they aren't making the enzymes to digest the protein properly, or there may be some food allergies going on, or. But over time, the brain and body gets depleted of these very, very key nutrients, and we pay for it. So, in my own fasting life, and what I recommend is to make sure you're bringing in, you're eating very thoughtfully, and because it matters, and that we bring in, if you like certain types of seafood, the Greeks, for instance, love octopus. I love octopus. Right? I mean, what we can eat, we can have some of the seafood, we can have some of the shrimp, we can have clams, we can have some of these seafood sources. Or you may get a dispensation from your clergy to eat more of the other things, to have more milk products, to have more eggs, to have more fish, to have more whatever. If you're one of those people who actually gets into trouble, emotionally or physically, if you go completely vegan. People in early recovery from addictive disorders are more likely to get into trouble. Yeah. Because we really need. Now, of course, we can use the over-the-counter amino acids. We can use protein powders. Right. There are ways to make up for it, and that's really important. Tyrosine is one of the amino acids that makes dopamine. Dopamine gets depleted in all addictive behavior, and low dopamine leads to cravings of all sorts. So increasing your supplementation of tyrosine during fasting periods will help significantly. Tyrosine is an amino acid that's not particularly found in large amounts in beans, nuts, and seeds. Right. Okay, you really are going to have to bring that from the outside. And for some people, it's important to. Other people, sail through fasting periods with no problem whatsoever. And that's wonderful. So, and different periods in your life. I had periods in my life where I could go absolutely 100% vegan and not notice anything at all. There are other periods in my life where that just was not the case.
Yeah, I love that you're honing in on seafood, on specifically shellfish and octopus, etc. Because I often forget when I think of animal protein. I'm thinking beef, chicken, etc. But I forget that we can get these same things through the shellfish, which I really don't incorporate and eat enough of during Lent. So I'm glad you honed that.
Mussels are yummy.
Oh yeah, and mussels.
Right? Yeah. I love mussels. You can even go absolutely fancy, and this is sort of going against the spirit of Lent, and do lobster.
My priest always tells everyone that in the spirit of the fast, he'd rather we open a can of tuna than eat a lobster. But they used to consider lobsters insects, right? Yeah. And they still do on the East Coast, I think. So
that's funny.
Wow. Yeah. So, and it's also a matter of what are we eating for during Lent, right? Are we just trying to keep the rules? Are we, wanting to have, fancy gourmet vegan dishes? Or are we just eating because we need to eat to give our body what it needs to survive?
Yeah.
Right? Bottom line.
Yep.
Yeah, before you go, or we wrap up, you have a nonprofit that I think is super interesting called Protein Saves Lives. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that is, what you're doing with that?
Absolutely. So, One of my specialties as a psychotherapist and addiction counselor is working with people with chronic relapse. Those who've gone to 3 or 4 or 10 treatment programs. Those who go to AA or NA meetings 3 times a day and still cannot stay clean and sober. And beat themselves up or are told, well, you obviously don't care enough. But when I drill down with these people, most of the time, it's because they don't take what they eat seriously. Nobody has ever told them that eating matters to recovery. And so they're really, really careless. And what happens is most of these clients of mine and a whole lot of other people I talk to as well tend to skip meals. Mm-hmm. And so what we have found is that missing a meal is probably the number one relapse trigger for all addiction because of what happens in the prefrontal cortex in the brain when a meal is missed. So when blood sugar drops, some very specific things happen in the brain. We lose access to willpower, first of all. There's research around this. We lose access to our recovery skills. We don't remember to use them. We get dysregulated because of adrenaline, because whenever blood sugar drops, adrenaline kicks in. And for some people, adrenaline can give us panic attacks. For other people, adrenaline can make us violent. And adrenaline can set off cravings for addictive substances or addictive behaviors. And so eating protein every 4 hours, and protein, because it digests slowly, keeps blood sugar really stable, and is also feeding your neurotransmitters, using that as the backbone of your diet, and putting other healthy food around it, keeps blood sugar absolutely stable, therefore allows you to maintain access to willpower, maintain access to your recovery skills, stay stable, and be able to utilize treatment effectively. And I have lots and lots and lots of stories around this. But about 10 years ago, it really, after a situation with a client where this was so true, it hit me hard, and I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops. Well, the nonprofit Eating Protein Saves Lives is dedicated to shouting it from the rooftops by raising the money to put billboards up across the country. Now, I need some real money for this, and we're not there yet, and so I'm inviting donors. I'm also inviting people to be on my advisory board and people to just share this information with your colleagues, with your communities, with your churches, so that together we can, as a grassroots movement, change the face of addiction recovery in this country.
I love that, because you see billboards up all over the place, obviously, and they're always advertising things that really aren't good for you and really aren't saving lives. But they're like typically for profit, and these billboards are expensive.
They are.
To be able to see something that's really going to be instrumental in saving lives and saving people's peace of mind.
Yes.
Families, relationships, just by something easy like making sure you eat protein every 4 hours or whatever.
That's right.
That's just so huge.
Yeah, it's a solution from the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And it's so simple that a lot of people don't want to believe it. And I say, fine, you don't have to believe me. Just try it.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you.
Just try even a minimum of 20 grams of protein every 4 hours.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah.
And premenstrual women in recovery, it should be every 3 hours. PMS, or low blood sugar, is a driver of PMS as well. And premenstrually women are at highest risk for mood and behavioral disorders and relapse.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so it matters.
It does. It does. Well, Christina, thank you for everything you do, your nonprofits, your course, your work with your clients. I mean, everything. I just think so highly of you and what you've dedicated your life to, and I appreciate you coming on our show today.
Well, you're welcome, Cynthia. Thank you. And Molly, thank you as well. It's been delightful being on your show and getting to know you both a little better.
Thank you. You have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too.
Cynthia, I'm so thankful that we brought Christina on as our guest this month. I think this is a topic that really needs to be talked more about. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who are suffering, families that are suffering alone.
Yes.
Because there's so much stigma and shame attached. And, especially within our parishes, we have an opportunity to really, again, flip the light on, to be a source of healing, not only for our own members, but really for our entire communities, to begin to really address these struggles that are so common, especially coming out of the lockdown, to really begin to look at this more seriously.
Yes, I think so. And even when we're talking about the realm of addiction, for instance, I think so many people think of addiction as alcohol or drugs or pornography, and addiction is anything that has control over you. I think I heard you say that earlier. Something that has control over you. So it could even be sugar. I know a lot of people know they're addicted to sugar. Smartphones, yes, exactly. Addicted to noise, right? I know people who find it very hard to be in a quiet home or a quiet car. So there are a lot of different things that control you. And one of the things I wanted to make sure that we don't do is, and I know Christina did a good job of this, but I just want to drive home that we don't want to oversimplify. We know that there are times when people need a psychiatrist. They would find a medication very helpful. There are definitely some times. But like Christina said, I think that is more the norm than it should be, because doctors are automatically going to that. They're not asking, what did you have for breakfast? They're not asking key questions. They're not checking people's neurotransmitters and their organic acids. Some simple blood tests that could tell us if there's an imbalance there, and we can fix those imbalances. So I think that is what brings hope to everybody.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad we're starting to look at this together, and that we have access to these amazing experts, even within our Orthodox community. It's so fascinating to me. There's people out there doing really amazing work. And it's good to showcase them and what they're doing. So. It
is. One of the things, too, that I wanted to touch on, after I interviewed Christina for my podcast, I had a couple people email me. They absolutely loved it. They learned so much. But they were wondering, okay, so we get it about the amino acids, we get it about the protein, but we're in Lent right now. So what does she have to say about that? So we asked her, and she really honed in on seafood and how seafood is such a good choice as far as getting complete amino acids in. But I know seafood is expensive, and a lot of us with children, I say us, I don't have children, but a lot of people like Molly with children. A lot of kids won't eat seafood. I do know that. So that's when you just have to lean back on nuts and seeds and grains like quinoa and amaranth and buckwheat and nut butters. And when I say seeds, I'm talking about have a bag of flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds that you just sprinkle on your food and on your salads and in your smoothies. I love smoothies. I know that the one that I use is by Truvani. It's one of the cleanest ones I found, and it's a pea protein. She also has some hemp and some other proteins in there. But a lot of the protein powders out there now also have branched-chain amino acids added to them.
Oh, wow.
So where it's a vegetable-based protein, you're also getting the amino acids from animal sources. So that's always nice. So there are so many things that we can do. And there are so many professional athletes and Olympic athletes who are out there winning medals eating vegan.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
It is amazing. They're eating the way we're only doing this for 7 weeks. They're doing it for a few years. and they're still doing extremely well. So I guess I just want to put aside that fear of, ooh, I'm not going to get enough protein and this is going to be an issue and now I have to worry about it. Don't.
Right.
Because after Lent, when we're eating our lamb and our ham and everything else that we have, we're going to be able to make up for it. So no worries about that.
Yeah. So really, I mean, don't give up. Never give up hope.
Right.
There are resources, like you said, psychiatrists who do great work. There's also ways to support your physical health while you're doing that. Keep searching. There's people out there that can help, and we'd love to bring more information to you as we go.
Exactly. So that was it for our dual interview of the peaceful mind and the healthy body. So now we're going to go on to the productive life. So again, a little bit different today. Molly, what are we going to talk about today?
So we thought that today we would just share some of our biggest aha moments when it comes to productive living or our productive life.
Yes.
We're always learning too as we go. And so sometimes, you'll stumble onto something that you're like, oh gosh, that was like a little hack. Maybe you'll hear something, a piece of advice that just really, for some reason, that time seems to make a lot of sense. So we thought we'd just share at least one from each of us recently that we've started to add to our routines that has actually made a difference. So
absolutely. You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, so I have a feeling there are going to be people out there that are like, Cynthia, of course, obviously, you're just now getting this, but
I feel like that's my entire life. I always feel like the last to be like, oh, yeah, the last to hear about something.
Like somehow I've been living under a rock, and I'm not sure why. Yeah, I get that. I think sometimes we get so focused and so much in a rut of what we know that we don't open ourselves up. So, okay, so I cook a lot and take the leftovers and freeze them. Okay, so I had this limiting belief. We've talked about limiting beliefs on the program before, where these are things that you hold to be true that really aren't. So you have to question yourself. But I was always thinking that frozen food has to be pre-cooked.
Yeah.
Because you freeze leftovers.
Yeah.
That's my life.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. So one of my clients told me that her sister found a company called Freezer Fit. So it's freezerfit.com if anyone's interested. And I watched one of the videos, and it was on making vegan dishes, and it was right before Lent, so I thought this is perfect. So in less than an hour, she put together 10 freezer meals.
Oh, wow.
Raw.
What?
Yes, raw. So I just know there are people out there thinking, of course. But okay, so Molly and I are on the same page, and I find comfort in this.
I'm totally surprised by that.
So let's take the Lenten vegan chili.
Okay.
It has lentils and beans and cans of tomatoes and vegetable broth and, of course, all the spices and everything you can imagine. She just dumped it all into these gallon silicone freezer bags, which, by the way, you can buy on Amazon, and they come with these little stands that hold them upright, so you can dump stuff in. You know how hard it is without that to put things in a freezer bag. Although there is that really cool method of putting it into one of those big Pyrex measuring cups and folding it over the sides and then dumping stuff in it. Did you know that?
No, I know nothing. This is amazing information.
So, but I'm getting excited. It makes me cough. So, you can do all this. So she put together these 10 meals in less than an hour. Now, granted, she cheated because everything was pre-chopped, and you and I know that it's the chopping that takes some time. If I had a
sous chef, I could get things a lot more done.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Me too. Me too. But this totally changed my Lent. I was able to freeze all these dishes ahead of time, and then the day you want to use them, you just take them out the night before and put them in the fridge, or you take them out the morning of, dump them in a crock pot, put the lid on, bye-bye.
So you put dried beans in that bag with the tomatoes. Fascinating.
Yeah,
that's
fascinating.
Amazing.
And froze it. So it was cut up green peppers and onions, and for the lentil chili. Yeah, I
And you would do
never-
that with, so if you did it with meat, you'd put raw meat in?
Yes, because if you're using a crock pot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just dump it in
Wow.
and boom.
So is there, on that website, is there meals? Like, is
Yes.
there recipes to use?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, so they have all these really helpful videos. And then for only $97 a year, which I know that's $100, but which I didn't do it because it's a little too rich for me. But they have access to something like over 500 recipes, and they come out with like 30 more a month or something like that. So
Okay.
if you're really into recipes and you really want to do this, I can see where a busy mom on a Sunday afternoon, let's say, just makes the whole week's worth of meals, pops them in the freezer.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, and it doesn't take up as much time because you're not doing the cooking ahead of time like I
Yeah.
used to do.
Yeah, because sometimes you're like, by the time you sear everything, I don't know, like so much prep work before you freeze it, and then you gotta, after you freeze it, do some things. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So that
good
was
to
my
know.
aha
So what was it
moment.
called again?
Freezerfit.com.
Freezerfit.com. Okay.
And there are free videos that you can watch. And with
Okay.
each video, they give you free recipes. So just go in there and watch all the videos and get the free recipes.
Okay, I will do that. That sounds amazing. So my aha moment the last month or so came from a conversation I had, a similar conversation with at least two different people. And both people were telling me, you know what, I am not a morning person. And my one friend was actually saying, like, she's like, I used to actually feel like not being a morning person was almost like a moral failing. Failure, because
yeah.
everyone's like, get up to work out, set your alarm. We talk about morning stillness. And, for some people, trying to do that kind of reflective work in the morning, they're so groggy
Right.
that it's not really even all that helpful. And I was like, oh, but these people were telling me that they are night owls. So they can start to do some of their really creative work or their reflective work in the evenings. Now, whereas for me, I am done.
Yep. Oh, me too.
Like, I have nothing to offer you at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like creative thought. And so, they were saying they needed to actually move maybe their morning stillness to a different time, like maybe a time in the afternoon or the evening when they had more mental clarity. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at my schedule and I realized, okay, I'm absolutely a morning person. Basically from like 6:30 a.m. till about 11 a.m., that's when I'm like sharpest. So if I'm going to do any kind of writing work, like copy, work on a devotional, working out, like I want to do that in the morning or return emails. And then I noticed that throughout the day, it takes me longer and longer to do those same things.
Yeah.
But what I was doing was I was in my mind thinking 8 a.m. walk, get my chores done, then I'll sit down in the afternoon and work. Okay, but I was actually working not smarter. I was working harder because if I had done that morning work, I'd get it done faster. So what I started to do was say, okay, I'm going to move my walk into the afternoon.
Okay.
And all of my physical work, so like my errands, the housework in the afternoon as well, and then reserve that morning time for my filled with less work. Amazing.
Very good. Changed up everything and you've been more productive that way?
Yes. I was like, I think so much better in the morning, and I hadn't even thought about how I was planning out my days like that, to my strengths and to my own kind of temperament or characteristics or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super valuable to sometimes we just do things in a certain order just because, like you said, we're kind of stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
And to mix it up and think like, wait, maybe this is a better time for me to do this type of work. And then in the afternoon is a better time to do, a different type of work. So to me, that was a huge aha moment. And the other aha moment I had related to that was when I was getting up early to come down and do my morning stillness, I come in my pajamas.
Oh, okay.
So I'm in my robe, I'm all cozy, I'm in my robe, and it takes me a while. I have my coffee. I notice that when I'm in my pajamas, I go pretty slow.
Oh, okay.
I just noticed that about myself. But if I got up first thing and got full dressed, put my pants on, my jeans on, brush my hair, like ready to go for the day, and then I come down, get my coffee, and sit down and do my morning stillness, my mornings were so much more productive.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to try that. That's a good idea.
I mean, I know some people love, I mean, that's great. If
I
you
do,
love that,
yeah.
you love that calm in the morning. But for me, getting dressed first, like, I was better able to like get up and go. And I don't know, that kind of tear through my to-do list and get it moving. That was just me personally. So those are the kind of things I discovered about myself.
It's funny you say that because it makes me remember back in my corporate days. I worked out of the house if I wasn't traveling 90% of the time. And of course I had coworkers all over the country that had the same type of job I did. And they would always laugh at me because I would get up in the morning, take a shower, get dressed, put my makeup on, do my hair, even on office days.
Yeah.
And then go in the office and work.
Yeah.
And they're like, Cynthia, why are you doing this? Like they're still in pajama bottoms and they're working. And now, come to think of it, I had totally forgotten that it did make me more productive back then, and that's why I did it, because I felt like, yes, I was going to work. It's time to be productive. It was that nudge. Yeah. So I can see why that works. In your case, what you found out, I need to implement that again and see if I can, because you know what? I mean, you're making headway on our book like you wouldn't believe. And I'm feeling like a sloth. So I better do something to kick it into gear.
You are working on many projects, many different projects. But yeah, I'm the same way. And I realize too, I know the same thing. People are like, really? You know, and I'm not saying it's for everybody to get up and have to get full dressed, but it makes me take myself seriously and my goals seriously. Yeah. And even to put like the things that I consider maybe mundane, to put some respect and dignity in those things too. Yeah. You know, that all of it is like really important work. And just putting your best foot forward, like first thing, it just makes me approach everything with a little bit more excitement and a little bit more, like, again, just like respect and seriousness.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I gave you something that you're going to implement. You gave me something I'm going to implement. And hopefully all of our audience is going to be able to implement both of these things also. Well, that's the end of our April show. We're so happy to be back with you. We can't wait for next month. We already have an idea of who we're bringing on. We'll be back to our old formatting. Hey, let us know what you thought about this, the way we combined the two segments and we did the productive life a little bit differently. We love your input. We're here to serve you. So with that, you know that there are a couple ways to keep in touch with us. The first one is, as we have always said, this is a membership-supported ministry. And the Filled with Less membership, last month we had special guest on, Dr. Donna Chaco. She came into our live session and we had a great time of learning with her. This month we are focusing on a personal vision. It's so important to know where you're headed if you want to create goals to actually get there. Yeah. So important in so many areas of your life to have that personal vision in place. So that was our exercise for this month, and our live membership meeting is coming up next week. It's not too late to join us for this month.
Awesome. Yes, and then we also have our Filled with Less book club. This month we chose a smaller book.
Yes.
A really good book, but just I know people are busy with Lent and Holy Week and Pascha. So we picked When You Fast by Joseph Latender. You can easily read that in one sitting. And we'll be talking about it on April 30th at 11 a.m. Central. So again, if you've read it, not read it, just join us for a good conversation.
Absolutely. Never feel like you have to read the book. Right. This is just like an in-person book club. I remember when we were in book club before, in person, 16 years ago.
Yes.
I would come, never even touching the book,
but sometimes
and just had a great time.
Sometimes I came for the snacks.
Okay, yeah,
that is one thing I wish we could offer you.
Yes, we wish we could offer you, but bring your snacks to the Zoom meeting, and we'll watch you munch.
Yes, we'll watch you eat your snacks.
All right, you guys, we will catch you next month, and make sure you stay in touch with us. Take care. God bless. We love you.